Welcome back to the show, and to the third segment we go around Trey Hendrickson and him being the most recent Bengal to request a trade. It happened last week, last Wednesday actually. ESPN's Adam Schefter reported it, that he requested a trade in order to try and get a new contract with the Cincinnati Bengals. This comes after 1 month about when T. Higgins requested a trade as well. So you look at the Bengals, you have two of their biggest stars requesting trades. Now, it's not likely that they deal one of them, both of them, definitely not both of them, and maybe either of them at all because Joe Burrow's coming back. Their head coach, Zach Taylor, has mentioned it before that they really believe that this season they want to get the best out of this season and have this be one of their most prominent Super Bowl run season with all the pieces that they have. It seems like they feel really good about it, but they're certainly not going to get it done without either of these two. Like I mentioned before, T. Higgins requested a trade. That doesn't seem likely. He even admitted to it a little bit that, he's open to staying, kind of seeing the writing on the wall with being franchise tagged. They don't have to deal him, so making a big deal out of it doesn't make too much sense from his part. But with Trey Hendrickson, very different because he last signed a 1 year contract extension to his initial 4 year, $60 million deal he got from the Cincinnati Bengals when they signed him from free agency. He has 2 years left on that with about $15 million salary at 29 years old right now. And with that, the biggest number I take away from that is $15 million as a salary, roughly for the last 2 years of this deal. You look at $15 million, Trey Hendrickson, not really talked about too much around the NFL as being this absolute monster, unstoppable force. When you think of the best edge rushers, defensive ends, outside linebackers, whatever you want to call them, the first names that pop to mind are Nick Bosa, TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, and guys like that, Micah Parsons as well. You don't really throw Trey Hendrickson's name in there too much, but he's coming off of one of his best years, a career high with 17 and a half sacks, which was tied for second with Josh Allen, and only Myles Garrett and TJ Watt have had more sacks than Trey Hendrickson's 53 sacks over the last 4 years. So you compare the numbers like that, and it might not be such a huge drop-off from those guys like Garrett and TJ Watt and Josh Allen in there as well. With that sort of production, his current salary, $15 million, ranks 11th in annual salary among edge rushers. The Bengals don't feel inclined to trade him right now, as they shouldn't. But obviously, because he signed through 2025, they don't feel like they have to do anything with this trade request. But the big issue, at least for me, if I'm Trey Hendrickson, 11th as the annual salary for him, the sort of production like I just mentioned with some of the top guys. TJ Watt is up there with making close to $30 million a year. Myles Garrett is around $25 million. And you see guys like Josh Allen as well getting a huge extension with the Jaguars. I want to say Danielle Hunter got an extension or signed a massive deal with the Houston Texans, so he's up there as well. All these guys are getting new deals around him, and Trey Hendrickson is really in the prime of his career right now, only still 29 years old. His current contract is running out a little bit, and $15 million just really isn't going to cut it. 11th ranked pass rusher. I probably couldn't name 11 guys better than Trey Hendrickson off the top of my head, so he, rightly so, deserves to be paid that much, but again, he just doesn't have the leverage simply in this situation because he did sign that extension and he's obligated to be and play on that deal at least through 2025. And to that feeling, to that idea of keeping Trey Hendrickson, head coach Zach Taylor also said, we want Trey to play here next year for us. He's going to play here next year for us. No doubt in Zach Taylor's mind. But Trey Hendrickson and his agent, Harold Lewis, met with Cincinnati in March to ask about a potential trade, according to ESPN. So this situation has sort of been brewing and nothing has been really concrete up until now. Reported by Adam Schefter last week about Trey Hendrickson officially, putting it out there into the public that he requested a trade. But where this kind of takes a turn a little bit around this whole idea with Trey Hendrickson and playing for the Bengals, having to play for the Bengals, Kelsey Conway, a beat reporter for the Bengals and for USA Today and Cincinnati.com, she said that despite his trade request, Trey is hopeful to stay in Cincinnati, but oddly enough, he also is considering retirement, and that came at surprise for me. Not that you haven't seen guys retire early, but it just comes really out of left field. How well Trey Hendrickson's been, how good of a team he's been on. He hasn't really suffered with injury problems at all in his career, so it just came at a shock to me that according to Kelsey Conway, he's also considering retirement. You don't want to say that the money is pushing him towards that, but it's just something to monitor if he ends up retiring and how that throws everything out the window for the Bengals. Him being one of their prominent, just overall players on their team, they don't have anywhere near the level of success that they have without him. Even with Jamar Chase, even with T. Higgins and Joe Burrow, he is just as important to the team as is Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Definitely, you might make an argument for Joe. He's the quarterback and how well he's been, but I'll put Trey Hendrickson up with either of those two other guys and how he has played into all this success that they've had. And also, Trey Hendrickson recently is also coming off of making 3 straight Pro Bowls to add on to these accolades that he just keeps building onto his resume, just proving why he deserves to be paid with some of those top guys in the league. But some positives to take are away from this. Recently, this past Sunday, ESPN's Jeremy Fowler said that Cincinnati and Trey Hendrickson are planning to talk about his contract situation at some point during this week. That is what he reported, and in his words, he said that maybe there's some optimism there that they could work something out, try and work something out. I know the Bengals don't want to lose him, and if they were maybe to be open to the situation of trading him if, the other option is retirement, and I'm sure they don't want to see that. He'll be a hot commodity on the market for any team. The first team that jumps to my mind is the Atlanta Falcons. If he were to be available, I'm sure the Falcons would be one of the first teams to ask the Bengals about, what can be done around this. And if he goes there, I'll take back most of what I said about the Michael Penix trade if they get Trey Hendrickson, but or not the trade, the Michael Penix draft selection in the draft. But that would be right away some teams that I think would benefit from this right away, with the Falcons being one of the highest suitors. And it is surprising, but with the recent trend that the Bengals have had, oddly enough, with some of their players, some of their better players, Jesse Bates, Jonah Williams, being in these contract disputes with the Bengals and just how they've handled it. Jesse Bates had one of the best seasons when he was wanting a contract extension. There were some rough goings of it with Jesse Bates and figuring it all out before he ended up going to the Atlanta Falcons and not re-signing with the Cincinnati Bengals. That is something to keep an eye on. And then Jonah Williams as well, leaving because they weren't happy with their contracts and being franchise tagged and stuff like that. He also decided to move on from the Bengals. And it's not really a trend, so to say, but it is at least a pattern. It happened with Jesse Bates, one of their best players, then Jonah Williams, highly drafted player for them. It is just something to keep in mind, especially with now T. Higgins requesting a trade and Trey Hendrickson as well. Both of them not happy with their contracts based on prior actions with the Bengals. It seems like one of them, both of them, at least none of them for now, are going to move on. But it is something to keep an eye on because the Bengals haven't been on the positive side of how these sort of situations ended up. And one thing that's interesting, sort of like the Dallas Cowboys and their contract extensions, trying to figure it out. Dak saying he doesn't want a lot of money. He doesn't want to be the highest paid quarterback. Then you have CeeDee Lamb sort of holding out. both of them attacking this situation of getting a new contract in different ways, sort of trying to one up each other, looking at it a certain way, and trying to jump the line and being the first ones to get that extension. Dak saying he doesn't want to be the highest paid. Maybe he jumps to the front of the line. CeeDee Lamb not attending their voluntary practices, maybe holding out the whole offseason. Maybe we should put him first because we can't afford to lose him and have him be upset and consider leaving. Those sort of things can relate here a little bit. T. Higgins requested a trade. Trey Hendrickson now requested a trade. So it'll be interesting to see how the Bengals sort of manage that, who they put first, how much money they give whoever they put first, and how that affects the contract talks, negotiations with the next person. To me, it seems like it's hard to put a designation on this, on who I think they discuss with first, who they value more. Probably Trey Hendrickson, just because I think every year there seems to be a lot of wide receivers. There's still a lot of talented wide receivers left on the free agent market that might not give you the same level as T. Higgins. Definitely wouldn't cost as much, so you can kind of balance the books there a little bit and give up T. Higgins if the other option is giving up Trey Hendrickson. I think I would say it's a lot harder to find an elite pass rusher to the level of Trey Hendrickson just in free agency or in the draft. That, I think, is a lot less likely. So, I don't know. It will be fascinating to see what the Bengals do first. If they do anything at all this year, that's the biggest point. They don't have to, but I'm sure they don't want to keep two of their best players angry or feeling some sort of way about the team not appreciating them and stuff like that. I'm sure they'll want to figure out those contracts, but for now, they're not obligated to do anything, so we'll monitor that, I'm sure, the rest of the offseason. I'll talk about it, I'm sure, multiple times as well. But in the meantime, we will put a ribbon in that and move on to the last segment of the show, talking about Roger Goodell and potentially hinting at adding another week to the schedule. Recently, they added a week, making it 17 games. Now he talked about adding yet another weekend and how that could all be beneficial with the Super Bowl landing on President's Day weekend. So, more details on that. What did he say exactly on the Pat McAfee show and my reactions to it after our last break on the show. So stick around. You're not going to want to miss what Roger Goodell said on potential schedule changes coming in the near future.